Number 10, Resident Evil Outbreak. The first one. I do enjoy the second one. Didn't quite make my list, but the first one has a lot of things that I was referring to in the in kind of my elongated monologue, right? It's that feeling of familiarity, of relatability. Because the first mission is my favorite one that I've replayed over and over again. The escape from, was it Jack's bar or Jay's bar? And, it's when the outbreak is first happening, and you're traveling through a bar, and you're traveling through rooftops, and you're on the city streets as the zombie horde is coming along. And again, I think most people watching this video have been to a bar once or twice in their life. Maybe some people have been on a rooftop, but people have also been in cities and towns and villages, and it's creepy and crazy seeing that relatability. And it was so fun. I think as just a pure Resident Evil game, I think everybody can enjoy this because there's a character for everyone. It feels a lot more based. Like some of the other Resident Evil games, like a lot of the newer ones, have gone off in these weird, I don't know, it's a whole nother level of sci-fi. Some of these characters and creatures that you deal with, and this is very down to earth. It's very street level, and I think the last level you're in a university. That's cool to me. That stuff's cool to me. So Resident Evil Outbreak is my number 10. I never took advantage of the PS2's online capabilities, but even as a solo play, this is a really good one. So that is my number 10. Number 9, Resident Evil Nemesis. I'm a little parched, so I'm not going to attempt to make the Nemesis stars scream. But the OG Nemesis is a really good game. The remake, definitely not in my top 10. I don't even know if I put it in my top 15. I thought it was so underwhelming what they did to that game. It felt so rushed. Raccoon City felt so small. It wasn't at least in the original Nemesis, the city felt bigger. There was plenty of streets and buildings to navigate through. I feel like with Nemesis, it was one block, and then, okay, you can kind of go here a little bit. Here's the power plant. Here's this other little area. It was so disappointing what they did with it. But we're here to talk about the good stuff, right? Resident Evil 3 Nemesis brought Jill back. It brought an interesting character in Carlos, and it brought this crazy stalker monster in Nemesis that was so iconic. He's almost been the face of Resident Evil. If there's a Resident Evil game or something, you'll almost always see Nemesis. That's how cool he was. Just a lot of neat features, and I just love that it mostly took place in the city, and there was an occasional building here or there, going to see the police station, going to see a bar, that was nice. And also it was the debut of the Mercenaries mode, so a lot of props for Resident Evil 3 for that. I like some of the choice options that you can do, you can duck and roll. A lot of cool concepts introduced in that game, and that is why it's my number 9. Number 8, after the, how do I put this nicely? Let's just say turd. I could say some other things, but I won't. After the turd, that was Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 7 was an absolute breath of fresh air. And, man, back to first person, this is really cool. I played it a little late because I was I've always talked about on the show how I'm a bit of a traditionalist, and those games went way off track. Resident Evil 6 was so bad, it was a huge turnoff for me for a while. But Resident Evil 7 brought back the horror element, the survival horror element, the actual like scares, like legitimately scared, navigating through the Baker family residence and everything in between. A little less fond of the monsters in it because they were all just these molded creatures and various strengths and weaknesses and types. They were a little bland, but this was a great game. I always wanted to play it in VR. But the first person perspective, no matter if you played it, normally with a controller or through the VR headset, was surreal, visually beautiful, and definitely took the game in the right direction, took the franchise in the right direction. So Resident Evil 7, can't say enough good things about it. That is my number 8. Number 7 is going to be the Resident Evil 1 remake. Now, the first one, I still enjoy playing it. It is severely dated, and I'm glad that they remade it the way that they did in 2002. I ended up playing it on the Wii a little bit later on, and man, it was great how much they expanded upon the mansion. Like, I had beaten the first Resident Evil a couple times, and it's crazy how small the remake made the original feel. There's not really a whole lot of outdoor stuff. They added a lot of elements like the Lisa Trevor aspect and a lot of other things. It was so smooth and yeah, just everything felt bigger. It was a gorgeous game, and I think there's some leaks apparently that they're going to remake Resident Evil 1, and that might be something we find out soon enough. But I kind of hope that they don't. I think Resident Evil Remake is perfect the way it is. It's a nice tribute to the old tank control style games while modernizing it and just cleaning up a lot of the issues. So I hope they leave it as is. But Resident Evil Remake is my number 7. Number 6 is Resident Evil Code Veronica. It took me a long while to get to this game too. I didn't get to play it right out of the gate, but I went out and found it and purchased it. And it's a cool story. It given Claire Redfield a lot of love. It's basically, for the most part, been her last main game appearance. I think she had a couple cameos and maybe an appearance in another game, but in the timeline, this was great for Claire. And obviously there's a cool side, last part of the game is with Chris, bringing Chris back, who hadn't been seen since Resident Evil 1. There's everything with Wesker and the whole Ashford family dynasty. There's some cool original monsters in that game. I really enjoyed finding that there's like a glitch cheat code where you can either get unlimited handgun ammo or unlimited green herb right out of the gate. There's videos, all sorts of videos of it on YouTube or wherever. But yeah, it's really good. This is their first entry on the PS2, if I'm not mistaken, and I think it's a little bit underrated. I do. I wouldn't hate seeing a remake for this. But I think it's a little bit underrated. I don't think people talk about it the way that they should. Code Veronica is an excellent game. So that is my number 6. Now for my top 5. And I want to keep in mind that, I can separate the two. I feel like the original games and the remakes can be held in two different classes. So you might see some bunching up here in the top 5 of some familiar games, but I think each should be treated as their own separate entry, if that makes sense. We'll start off with this, is Resident Evil 2. And I talked about how that magazine and the PlayStation magazine article was really my first glimpse at Resident Evil and what it was and what it, how terrifying this world was. And I remember seeking it out. I was at GameStop and this was back when they were still selling PS1 games. I think it was my 15th birthday. I was given like $20 to go buy a video game. And they had it. They had both discs in like a little sleeve, and I purchased it and beat the crap out of that game too, many times over. I've beaten it so many times that I think nothing of doing the infinite ammo glitch. That you go to the controller settings, you hold R1 and press square like 10 times, something along the lines of that. But it's just fun. Like the police station aesthetic, which is a little bit more grounded than a mansion. The puzzles in that game were just tremendous, and some of my favorite monsters were in that game. Mr. X was great. The debut of the Licker, which is one of the most terrifying video game enemies of all time. Resident Evil 2 holds up. The original Resident Evil 2 holds up well on its own. Even today, I think there's a lot of value in it. I'll still go back and play it, and I have a lot of fun doing so. So that's my number 5. Number 4 is a game that sold me on the Wii. I talked about this last week, but it is Resident Evil: The Umbrella Chronicles, the track shooter game that covered Resident Evil 0, 1, and 3, and also had their own little side missions too. Oh, man. 2-player, next to a buddy, just blasting away zombies, aiming for a high score, right? That was a big thing with scores, and you can do like combos, and there was all sorts of little hidden areas. You got to blow stuff up and try and find files, right? Shoot a door down, so maybe instead of going this way, your character can go that way. Or shooting a painting or some kind of statue and trying to grab a file or some kind of weapons. It was a really, really good track shooter. And for somebody who adored playing House of the Dead games in the arcades, this is something I would have loved to play back in the day. And it was a nice throwback to those with a much more popular franchise in Resident Evil. So Resident Evil: The Umbrella Chronicles, if you've never played it, I advise you to seek it out. Its sequel, Darkside Chronicles, is a pretty good game, but Umbrella Chronicles is, in my opinion, head and shoulders above. So that is my number 4. Number 3 is the Resident Evil 4 remake. This is a damn near perfect game, and honestly, all my top 3. They could all be number 1s. I'd be perfectly honest with you. My top 3 could all be number 1s. But Resident Evil 4 Remake took a perfect game and expanded on it and still found a way to be perfect. Like, Resident Evil 4 was like the first 10 rating I've seen in a Game Informer magazine that I've seen. And Resident Evil 4 Remake took all of that, built this brand new world, and crafted this similar but bigger storyline with all sorts of side quests, like big monster hunts and new villains, and still made it perfect. This game is really gorgeous, and it makes playing the OG Resident Evil 4 a little difficult, but I think they both stand out in their own right. And I was pleasantly surprised. I think the Mercenaries mode in Resident Evil 4 Remake is so much better than the original one. I will give it credit for that. But RE4 Remake is my number 3. My number 2 is the original Resident Evil 4. But I am specifically picking out that VR version that I mentioned in last week's episode that I played on the MetaQuest 2 or Oculus 2, whatever you decide to call it. That is the best Resident Evil playing experience I've ever had. It will never ever be topped. Every time I boot up the VR, that is the only reason why I go back to it, is to play that game. Again, the motion of reloading or grabbing first aid spray, or when you finally unlock the unlimited rocket launcher, right? Just holding it up, like you got to hold it up properly, 2 hands, and fire it off. And seeing just some of these little details up close, and it's really eye-opening. It changes the way you see the original Resident Evil 4. And if you know somebody who has an Oculus and maybe has it or doesn't have it and you just want to get it, please go play that. It will change your life. probably. But it's unbelievable. I love saving, and you get to type in your name and hit enter for the save file. You're actually physically grabbing keys and puzzle pieces. You're actually like there's certain puzzles that you do where you're like the if you recall forget what it's called, but like there was like the 9 pictures, or you got to organize it. It's like all messed up. It's in the castle level when you're Ashley, and you're trying to get one of the pieces for that mural, and you actually have to slide it and try to get the picture right physically with your own hands. It is so well done. Please go play it. Cannot speak enough good things about it. And my number 1 is the Resident Evil 2 remake. I remember this game was technically released the day before my wedding. So it was a midnight release on January 25th? Yes, January 25th, 2019. Yes, I remember. I stayed up late from the 18th from the 24th to the 25th. Stayed up for the midnight drop. It was ready to go on my PlayStation 4. And I stayed up until the wee hours of the morning. The next day when, you're staying in the hotel, setting up, I was back on it, playing it. I brought the PS4 to my hotel room. And, oh, man. Wonderful. One of my favorite, like images of that game is the gas prices from that gas station right out of the gate, like $1.98 a gallon. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. But another remake that took a great game, expanded upon it, made it bigger, and maintained the perfection. The way that Mr. X legitimately stalks you is incredible. And I think that's what made Resident Evil 3 remake so disappointing, is that Nemesis never felt the way that Mr. X did, where, you fire a gun and you're legit worried that he's going to pop up, or you can hear the footsteps coming, or you can hear the footsteps above you. It was just visually just so good. I've replayed that game many, many times over, and I will continue to do so. They're probably going to remake it again. Who knows? You never know, but I love it. And that is it, everybody. That is the Resident Evil games list, or just plain and simple, the Resident Evil list.